Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room. Happy Sunday. It's not a very nice day today here, unfortunately. Hopefully this won't affect my energy levels during this video too much, because I want you guys to derive enjoyment from it. This video is going to take a slight departure from discussions of Enneagram that I've been focusing on for the last couple of weeks and return to the topic of specific individual cognitive functions, in this case TI, under the somewhat provocative title, TI is not what you think. If that is in fact the title, I will keep when I decide to publish the video, but if it isn't, it will be something relatively similar. Now, before I move on to my topic, let me just remind you that I have written 2 books in the last year. Infinite Castle, book of fiction, features an INFJ. The Ecstatic Soul, most of you guys will have heard of this book by now. Maybe some of you guys, probably some of you guys have this book on your bookshelf. I dare say the authoritative intellectual exploration of the INFJ personality. Both less than $10, all links to Amazon available in the description box. The reflections on TI that I want to share with you in this video were to some extent precipitated by comments on my videos on Enneagram and videos that I've released in the past. And they are as follows. It's not uncommon, and it's a compliment, that people say, viewers say to me in comments, that I have good TI, or that I don't seem to be able to turn it off. And that's not meant in a negative way, because my presentations are typically quite, that's how I understand them, pretty clearly articulated, and the connections between the different arguments are also clear, and it seems convincingly the case that each follows from one another until I get to my conclusion. Now, obviously, that's not meant to say that everything about it is perfect. It is not. But what interests me in this particular video is that people tend to see this in me or others, mostly others, because there's a lot of people who are seen as rational or logical in this sense, and they when it comes to trying to understand and explain how that happens, they think of TI first. And well, in fact, I suppose the point I want to make in this video is that it's not really TI that accounts for this, or if it does, it only does that partly in conjunction with both other functions and with natural human capacities or propensities that aren't really captured by the framework, the Jungian framework of the cognitive functions. So first of all, it seems quite intuitive that some people are just better at articulating thoughts clearly, both in their minds and in their presentation, than others. In fact, this doesn't necessarily mean that they are smarter, because there are lots of different ways to be smart, and that capacity is one capacity among many. But it's true that sometimes people who have that, and I guess Jordan Peterson would be a good example of someone who has that, the ability to articulate things in this kind of way. They tend to often make compelling cases, and they can be seen by other people as being quite logical individuals. But the thing is that TI is not really about that, and that is not quite how you measure how proficiently someone uses TI. Another way to put the point is that someone could have like a genius level use of TI and be awful at showing it. They might show it to, let's say, you can be, maybe a paradigmatic case would be a mathematician whose genius will be seen by other mathematicians, but who might be hopeless. Who might be hopeless at explaining anything in, verbally speaking to a broad audience. That's because the faculty that has to do with breaking things down clearly for a large audience, an audience that goes beyond specialists, is JE for the most part. It's the function of extroverted judgment, whether it be FE, which is more intersubjective, or whether it be T, which is more objective. The function of extroverted judgment is the presentational, justificatory, and expressive function par excellence. Another way to put this point is to say that the appeal and making a convincing case to a broad audience is as much linked to your rhetorical skills as it is linked to your logical skills. And that if you do have logical skills, in this case, we want to say, because TI is linked to logic in a way that I will clarify in a second, if you do have the TI logical skills, being able to articulate well, which is not a TI capacity, will enable people to see workings of your mind in a clear fashion, which do include the TI specific logical skills. But you could also have people who are very rhetorically gifted and who can give you the appearance of stringing together very compelling arguments. But if you look a little bit further into the arguments, maybe if you read them in text, maybe if you read texts by them, you'll notice that actually it's very far from clear that they are that logically gifted after all. It's not easy, unless you're specifically trained or unless you're particularly insightful and perceptive, to pick up whether someone is logically sound, logically very acute. And TI is a function that does most of its work, actually, in fact, all of its work internally, not externally. So what you will see externally if someone has very good proficiencies at TI is not the TI workings itself, but the representation of those workings in language via the articulating capacity of FE, okay? And in fact, there's lots of examples of very convincing, compelling speakers who are FE lead, FE dominant, or strong FE auxiliary kind of people. It's not that interesting to read their books because you notice that, books demand a level of rigor that just is not there in public speaking, and cannot really be diverted away by appeals to empathy and by displays, by performative displays, if you like. So this one way in which this also manifests dramatically is in the fact that people who are very TI proficient, but who are not good at articulating, might not be good at articulating in such a way as to demonstrate their TI proficiency to a broad audience, because people are not in their minds. They might not be good at it precisely because their TI proficiency is so overpowering compared to their other functional proficiencies. So that seems like a paradox in a way, isn't it? It's like you can't see the evidence. People are not able to say, yeah, this person is extremely TI proficient. And yet that is very much the case. But people can see it. Why is that the case? Why can't they see it? It's because someone who's very, very TI proficient and who always is connecting back to TI is going to be constantly refining in their minds the logical structure of what they're trying to articulate in their minds, trying to say, trying to express, trying to think, okay? Trying to think rather than say. So TI is at the level of thought. You have thoughts. TI is going to try to get to the very core structure of the thoughts and get rid of all the extraneous material, which is why, in this sense, TI is linked to logic and is linked to mathematics, because both logic and mathematics, as you probably will know, deal in symbols a lot of the time. And what is a symbol if not an entity reduced to its purest abstraction and without any of the extraneous bits that the more natural use of language always brings in, including in the rhetoric of a lot of FE dominance. So in this sense, TI has nothing to do with the ability to make a compelling case and what looks like a compelling argument following from sound premises, and everything to do with speaking in a way, if it does reach the stage of speaking, and effective speaking is to speak in a way that is as transparent as possible. In a sense, someone who uses TI very well and is able to use FE well as well is someone who will try to express themselves not necessarily in the most compelling way possible, but in a way that is, who's like the logical structure of their sentences is as transparent as possible. In other words, people will be able to pick up just how the sentences are following from each other deductively, because the articulation is there in the words in such a way that if there is a flaw, you can pick it up straight away. That's very, very indicative of the presence of TI. If there is a flaw, you can pick it up straight away and correct it. Whereas someone who's very proficient in FE over TI might be more compelling to a broad audience, but you will usually won't have access to that clarity that allows you to see the mistakes. Because in some sense, it's in the interest of very strong FE but a weaker TI for you not to see the mistakes, so that you can be emotionally compelled. Okay? So all this is to say that if someone struggles to express thoughts that seem to you coherent in language when you communicate with them, do not assume that that means that they don't have good TI. That might mean that they have excellent and very proficient use of TI. In fact, it might mean that their TI is a little bit too strong compared to their FE, right? If someone is very good at articulating, that might mean, well, in fact, that only means that, their FE is probably quite good. But it will, in an indirect fashion, allow you to see whether their TI is also good, because then you'll be able to see for yourself. You might notice their TI is actually not that great, or you might notice that the TI is actually quite good. But it has to be said that on the whole, FE and TI, when it comes to the exposition of one's thoughts in language, they tend to have somewhat opposing roles, and they're not always easy to reconcile. Because FE is always directed toward convincing the audience, making a compelling case for the audience, connecting with the audience through words, whereas TI is really much more directed toward the inner world. Are my thoughts coherent? Are they articulated well? Are they as transparent as I can make them to be? Now, notice something very striking very soon, in fact, immediately. The symbolic language of logic, the symbolic language of math, that's not going to get you very far in terms of compelling a broad audience. And that is the most dramatic case or example you can give for this opposition. Someone who is very intellectually honest and has good TI and is someone who's very strong in FE, in a sense, they have a lot of merit in being able to combine both because of these opposing tendencies. Now, I'm not in any way claiming that I embody that kind of person, but I would claim that I embody someone who's trying to do that, and I suppose in his own way, Jordan Peterson is probably sincere when he's trying to do that as well, though I have come with time to believe that a lot of what we see and think is TI, and I used to think is TI, might be more due to FE, because when it comes to articulation, he's excellent. And I use this example because, this is where you can see like FE-TI at work. And in fact, his FE-TI, Jordan Peterson's FE-TI is still like the combination of them. It is not perfect, but it is still like, achieved at a high level, relatively speaking, compared to most of us. Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Clarification of the respective roles of TI and FE in cognition and in articulation. Don't assume that if you're not good at articulating, your TI is not up to scratch. It might well be the opposite. Okay, on these thoughts, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, guys, and I'll see you next week. Ciao, ciao. Don't forget, I have a Patreon page that you can also support. Ciao.